Hello and welcome back to a brand new video. In a recent video, we learned how to convert a list to a string. And today, we're going to learn how to convert a string to a list. But before I begin, there's a small request that I want to make. More than 96% of you that watch these videos are not subscribed. It helps this content reach more people and aids my goal to spread code literacy when you subscribe. Because the algorithm redirects more people towards these videos. So if you want to aid the goal and help me spread code literacy, I request you to please subscribe. And if you are one of those 4% that are already subscribed, thanks a lot for doing that. And now let's get back to the video. Alright, so now we have a list with the value this is a string. And now we want to add the value of this string to a list. How do we do that? It is actually really simple with Python. We first of all go ahead and define a list. I'll call my list L. And next up, what we can do is we can simply go ahead and change the value of L to be a list containing the elements of this string using a string function split. So we go ahead and say L equals string.split and we give just the parentheses. Now this is a bare function. Now this has no parameters so far and let's see what it does. So I'll quickly go ahead and write print L. Yes, that's it. So when we run this, observe how all the different words in this string became a separate element inside of this list. This became an element, is became an element, a became an element, and a string became an element. Now, this is just simply showing that all of these words are becoming elements. But what if I added a few more spaces here? What would happen now? Do you think something would change? Let's run it and check. No, nothing changes. It remains the same. This is because the split function, when used without any parameters, separates a string at every white space that it encounters. So whenever it encounters a white space could be a regular space, a tab, a carriage return, a vertical tab, anything, any white space character, a new line, and whenever it encounters one of those, it splits the string into a substring. And another thing, now you might wonder, like there are multiple white spaces here, so it must separate them at each of these white spaces, so that would create empty list, right? But what this function also does when it is run without any parameters is that it omits all the empty strings, the empty substrings that are created from being added to the list. So in the end result, you only get the list with characters that are not white spaces or not empty. If I were to add a space right here after this and somewhere here, you would notice that I get multiple elements in my list. Now this is all working without a parameter. Let us understand what parameters we can add to this. I'll quickly revert my string to its original form. And now let us talk about the parameters. How about we create another list called S, and this time we'll use parameters with S. Let's say string.split, and let us use a separator. And I'll quickly go ahead and print S. Now here, the first parameter that I have used with S is a separator. Now, what does a separator mean? It means exactly what it sounds. A separator is us telling Python where to separate a string at. If I were to add a few more spaces right here, you would see a difference. Let us quickly run this program and see. So you see, this is the first one is the output for our list L without any parameters, and second one is our output for list S. If you notice, a difference between these is that in list S we also receive empty strings, empty substrings with no characters inside of it. This is because when we defined our separator to be a space, it takes into consideration a space that is directly after the S right here, and then the space right after it, and it splits it twice right here in between of these, and then it also notices a space right here, and it splits it again, so creating two empty substrings in between of these three spaces. So those are observed right over here, and then it goes about the same way as our regular function would with the remaining, because it notices only a single white space between it. Now the first list did not have any empty substrings because it separated all the white space at each white space, and it did not have a specific separator, and so it considered all three white spaces to be a single white space in a nutshell. And now this separator can be anything. You could create it to be a comma for comma separated values if you were to parse through them, or you could convert it to a full stop. It could be anything. Sky's the limit. Whatever you have separated your strings with, you can use that character as a string.split separator. Now there is another parameter in this, but before I talk about that, it is a point to notice that your separator, if you're defining a separator, can never be empty, because that would raise an error. That is just how it is. Anyways, now let's learn about the second parameter for the split function, and for this we'll create another list. Let's call it M. I'll define this list, and then let's call M equals to string.split, and obviously we'll have to write the first parameter to mention the second one, and I'll keep it to be just a single space. And now the second parameter is maxSplit. I'll write about both the parameters right here. So this is separator, and this one that we're using right here is a maxSplit. So like it sounds, what maxSplit does is it defines how many times at max do you want this string to be separated or to be splitted. Now if I say 0, suppose, and let's quickly output this as well. I'll clear my console here and go ahead again. So you notice now the first output that we have received is list L, which we have already talked about 1,000 times. It only separates the list at each white space and returns us with 4 elements, the 4 words in our string. Now the second one, it gives us 6 elements because our string is separated at each white space, each single space, not each white space, each space, and we have multiple spaces between here, which results in a few empty substrings to be created. And now in the last one, which we are now talking about, the maxSplit, it returns with a single element in our list because we defined the maximum number of splits to be 0. Now that means our list never did a single split and it just added it to a list as an element. Now what if I say 1 as the maximum number of splits? Let us see. So you notice we got 2 elements, this and is a string in another element. This is because we encountered the first split right here after this, when we encountered a single space which was our separator, and after that whatever was remaining, since the maximum number of split was met, was put into a single substring. Now what if I call it to be 4? Since there were 4 different words in it, should that make any difference? Let's find out. When we called it for 4, since we had defined our separator to be space, just like this list S, we also got empty strings in this. So instead of getting a string as separate elements, we got a string in a single element and the empty substrings before it as separate elements. And if you notice, we have only 5 elements in this. So a rule of thumb is the maximum number of elements in your list for using a maxSplit would be, the number of your elements would be always 1 more than the number of maxSplits. That is the maximum number of elements in your list. Now what if I have a really long string, a really long file that I'm parsing through, and I want to split it, and I don't know how many times I would have to split it, and I could just get through without mentioning anything in place of the second parameter, or instead I could do this. I could write -1 in place of maximum number of splits. What this basically does is it tells Python that we do not have a defined number of maximum splits, and it splits however many times it is possible for Python to split. So you see, now this time we have received the same number of elements as the list S in list M as well. So that is all for converting a string to a list. That is all for this video. I hope you learned something new and you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to drop a like to this video and subscribe for more such videos. If you have any doubts, you can comment them down below, and if you want to learn something specific, make sure to comment that down below as well. I'll make a video on that very soon. Until next time.